There comes a moment in every life where we are torn between our pain and our hope, between the person who wounds us and the illusion that they are also our salvation. Today, I invite you not just to think, but to reflect deeply on a question both ancient and painfully modern. We rarely recognize it in the moment, but suffering in relationships often points to a hidden agreement, an unconscious contract formed not in the light of logic, but in the shadows of our psyche. When someone causes us pain repeatedly, and yet we remain drawn to them, there is often a deeper reason beneath the surface. This attachment is not always about the person as they are now, but about what they represent within the hidden architecture of our emotional history. We may not consciously choose pain, but pain often mirrors something familiar, something ancient within us. It may be the echo of a parent's absence, the sting of conditional love, or the silent ache of never being fully seen. And so, we find ourselves entangled with people who unknowingly play out roles in an old, unresolved drama. In this way, suffering is not random, it is a signal. It exposes a pact made between our inner child and our adult self. I will endure, if only I can feel loved. The suffering, then, becomes not just emotional pain, but a reenactment. A reenactment of the hope that maybe this time, if we hold on tightly enough, the story will end differently. We chase resolution through repetition. We hope that the person who hurts us now will also be the one to heal us, to rewrite our past with their future actions. But such hope is dangerous when it keeps us bound to cycles of pain. The unconscious contract is rarely fair, because it trades our present peace for the possibility of imaginary closure. To recognize this contract is the first act of liberation. We must ask, why am I here truly? What part of me believes this suffering is necessary, and what do I fear would happen if I let go? When we begin to answer these questions, we start to tear the invisible agreement apart, thread by thread. Only then can we love with awareness rather than from a place of wounding. Pain has a purpose. It arrives as a signal that something within us or around us demands our attention. It is a teacher, often a strict one, but a teacher nonetheless. Pain sharpens our perception. It strips away illusion. It invites us to examine what we have avoided, buried, or denied. In the early moments of suffering, there is often clarity, however uncomfortable. We see ourselves raw, vulnerable, exposed. And in that exposure, we are given the opportunity to grow, to reflect, to become more conscious of what we truly need and why we have accepted less. But the problem arises when we mistake the lesson for a lifestyle. Pain was meant to pass through us, not to live within us. It is not meant to become the place where we build our emotional home, yet many of us do exactly that. We settle in it. We normalize it. We begin to believe that constant hurt is a natural part of love, that anxiety is proof of attachment, or that suffering somehow validates our emotional worth. Over time, pain becomes familiar, and familiarity breeds comfort, even in dysfunction. In this state, we begin to craft identities around our wounds. We use them to explain who we are, why we act the way we do, why we stay. We say, "This is just the way I am," when in truth, it's just the way we've learned to cope. Pain whispers that it is safer to stay in the known agony than to risk the unknown of healing, but that is a deception. What once served as a wake-up call becomes a lullaby, keeping us asleep to our own potential. The truth is, pain does not require your loyalty. You are not obligated to remain in cycles of suffering just because they feel familiar. You are allowed to outgrow your pain. You are allowed to move forward without dragging the weight of every wound behind you. Let pain teach you, yes. Let it carve out space within you for deeper understanding. But then let it go. Do not confuse the fire that forges you with the prison that traps you. The lesson was never meant to be a life sentence. It was meant to be the doorway to something freer, fuller, and far more alive. When love becomes a source of pain, confusion, or self-doubt, it is necessary to ask, is it truly love, or is it a projection? Often, we don't fall in love with the real person in front of us, but with an idea, a symbol, or a hope that they seem to represent. We project onto them the qualities we long for: safety, belonging, affection, redemption. In the beginning, this illusion can feel intoxicating. It fills in the cracks of our loneliness and colors over our inner voids with the hues of imagined completeness. But projections are not relationships. They are reflections of ourselves, cast onto another, and they blind us to who that person really is. This is how love begins to harm, not because the other person is inherently cruel or malicious, but because we are not truly seeing them. We are seeing what we want them to be. We ignore the red flags, we rationalize the distance, we excuse the disrespect. Why? Because the image we have created of them serves a function. It allows us to believe that healing can come from outside of us, that someone else can love us in all the ways we have not yet learned to love ourselves. And when they fail to meet that expectation, as they inevitably will, we feel betrayed. But it was not they who betrayed us. It was the illusion. True connection requires seeing someone as they are, not as we wish them to be. It demands presence, honesty, and the willingness to let go of fantasy. When love harms us over and over again, it is often a sign that the connection we thought we had is more projection than reality. We remain entangled not because of shared growth, but because of emotional dependence. We keep trying to force the person to become the figure in our mind, the savior, the healer, the one who will finally make everything feel right. But no one can carry that weight. It is not their job to repair what we haven't acknowledged within ourselves. The longer we hold on to projections, the more disconnected we become from the other person and from our own truth. We begin to lose ourselves in trying to sustain something that was never fully real to begin with. To break this pattern is not to give up on love, it is to reclaim it. It is to step away from fantasy and toward authenticity, to say, I will no longer settle for a love that only survives in my imagination, because real love may be imperfect, but it does not consistently injure the soul. And once you stop projecting, you may finally be ready to meet someone, not just with your longing, but with your clarity. True healing does not come through clinging, it comes through release. To truly become oneself, to reach that state of inner wholeness and psychological maturity, one must eventually face the hardest truth of all. Not everything or everyone is meant to stay. The journey of becoming, the deep, often painful unfolding of the self, requires the bravery to let go of attachments that no longer serve who you are becoming. And often, the hardest thing to release is not the relationship itself, but who you believed you were within it. Letting go is not abandonment, it is not failure, it is not betrayal of love. Rather, it is an act of profound responsibility to the soul. To individuate, to separate from the illusions, projections, and inherited patterns that have shaped us, is to say, I choose to become real, even if it costs me the comfort of what is familiar. That kind of courage is rare. Because the familiar, even when it is painful, offers a sense of control, a sense of identity, and walking away from that can feel like stepping into a void. But growth always begins in that space of uncertainty. You cannot transform while staying rooted in what keeps you small. You cannot heal while you are still begging for love in places that repeatedly deny it. To individuate is to no longer define yourself by someone else's validation. It is to stop shrinking to fit into relationships that demand the abandonment of your truth. It is to shed roles, masks, and dependencies so you can meet yourself, stripped of illusion. This path is not for the faint of heart. It is not always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it is as quiet as choosing not to answer a message that once held power over you. Sometimes it is as subtle as changing the internal story from "I need them to be okay" to "I am okay, even without them." These small moments of letting go are acts of spiritual defiance against the forces, internal or external, that try to keep you entangled in what you've already outgrown. Ultimately, to let go is not just to walk away from another. It is to walk toward yourself, to honor your wholeness, to declare that you will no longer trade your peace for temporary comfort, your dignity for attention, or your future for familiarity. This is the work of individuation, not isolation, but integration. Not rejection of others, but a full return to the truth of who you are when no one else is shaping you. And when you find that truth, you realize something extraordinary, that you never needed to be completed by someone else. You only needed to be reclaimed by yourself. When we stand at the crossroads of whether to stay or to walk away, our first instinct is often to consult our fear. Fear is loud. It speaks urgently with the voice of survival. It says, "What if you never find someone else?" Or "What if you're making a mistake?" Fear clings to the familiar. It draws maps based on past wounds and imagines futures through the lens of scarcity. It tells us that suffering is safer than the unknown, that pain is proof of how deeply we care. But fear, while it may protect us in danger, is not meant to guide our deepest choices, because fear doesn't seek truth, it seeks control. In contrast, the soul whispers. It does not panic. It does not beg, it knows. The soul is that quiet knowing inside you that doesn't need justification. It is the part of you that remembers who you are beneath your roles, your trauma, and your longing. When you ask your soul, not your fear, you begin to ask different questions. Not "Will I be alone?" but "Am I honoring my truth?" Not "What do I lose if I let go?" but "What part of me do I reclaim if I do?" The soul asks not for safety, but for integrity. Too often, we make decisions from the part of us that is still wounded, still waiting, still desperate to be chosen. We listen to the voice that says we are unworthy of more, and so we compromise again. We shrink, we stay, but each time we betray ourselves to avoid discomfort, we drift further from the very wholeness we crave. There comes a point when you must ask, who am I building my life around, my fear or my soul? Because they will take you in opposite directions. Fear will keep you entangled in people who dim your light, so long as they offer the illusion of security. But the soul will ask you to walk away from anything that requires the abandonment of your inner self. Even if that path feels lonely at first, it is the one that leads to peace, not the temporary quiet that comes from avoidance, but the deep, unwavering peace that comes from alignment. And when you learn to ask your soul instead of your fear, your choices begin to change. You stop seeking people who only reflect your wounds. You begin to choose relationships that mirror your growth, your strength, your healing. You begin to choose you, not out of selfishness, but out of sacred responsibility to your life. Because the truth is this: you cannot build a future worth living if fear is holding the blueprint. But if your soul is the architect, your life becomes a home you can finally live in.